Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan, and today we're going to be taking a look at the difficulties of setting up a fully automated factory, because these are the questions that ANDOR asks us. From day one in the Narkina prison arc, a lot of you guys have been bringing up this great point that, hey, meat bags are a terribly inefficient source of labor when you compare them to an assembly line full of robotic arms and droids. You don't have to feed droids, you don't have to make sure they're obedient, heck, they don't even have to sleep. So what gives? Why are they using human prisoners?
We are nothing to them. Melch is right. We're cheaper than droids and easier to replace.
That's actually a really good answer, and we could probably just leave it there, but no, I'm curious. And if you're watching this video, if you're a fan of this channel, you're probably a part of the more curious segment of the Star Wars fandom. Which is good, because curiosity, the pursuit of more facts, information, and knowledge, not only makes you wiser, but it's also the best medicine for depression and stagnation, which I'm sure is a very common ailment that a lot of these poor inmates in the Narkina 5 facility are suffering from. So let's take a look. What are the costs associated with keeping a bunch of prison laborers alive and working when compared to a fully automated factory? Well, for one, the factory full of automated droids can be built anywhere. There's no need to build a massive underwater facility to make escape more difficult. Heck, if it's fully uninhabited, you could put it in space, in vacuum, or in some other really cheap location where the real estate costs aren't that high. The only thing you have to consider are access to energy or some other raw materials like water for cooling. But once you get inside of the factory, well, that's when it gets really expensive. A lot of people have the wrong picture of what the manufacturing sector really looks like. The reality is there is no universal robot arm that just makes everything. You'll find instead a huge mixture of different technologies, different type of machines, both old and new techniques, along with all sorts of different skilled workers on any given assembly line. What you'll almost never find is some magical assembly line with just robot arms perfectly creating things like this and this. There's always going to be a mixture of machines, people, machines, and other things. And that's because most automated machines that we find in factories are very inflexible and only designed to do a very specific task repetitively. Any change in design of the product or upgrade might require calibration of those machines, or potentially even require a complete replacement of that machine with something completely different. You know how people are always like, oh, America doesn't manufacture anything anymore? Well, they're right. It's actually very expensive and can be very costly to manufacture things in the United States, and there's a lot of risk involved as well. If you take a look at some of the largest tech companies in America, like NVIDIA or AMD, or a consumer electronics company like Apple, they don't do any in-house manufacturing. Instead, they just do design. They design the chips, and then they ship out those designs to companies like Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturer, who solely focuses on creating those kind of chips. Now, TSM is able to scale up their operations because they're pulling in all of this work from these various different companies so that they can actually make the manufacturing process profitable. But again, it's actually very risky, and the profits can be very slim if they make mistakes. And that is because this is a very investment-heavy industry. For instance, every time that these American companies want to decrease the size of their chips or maybe use a different material, it's TSM that has to front that bill and recalibrate their factory and buy highly specialized and highly customized and therefore expensive machinery. They have to buy this stuff from another specialized company like Applied Materials or ASML. ASML is a Dutch company that sells these $140 million lithography machines that essentially engrave silicon wafers. Without these machines, TSM can't do anything. This $140 million machine has 100,000 different components, and it takes 40 freighter containers or 4 jumbo jets to ship. Every year, ASML only produces a few dozen of these things, and TSM has to wait in line with Samsung and Intel, their competitors, for these machines. Any delay can cost a lot of money. This is why when people say, oh, screw global trade and working with other countries, it's not as simple as that. Every country, every region of the world has specific advantages and resources, government subsidies, and workforces that allow them to develop these very niche but important links in the supply chain, which comes together in this kind of controlled but organized, chaotic mess. And these chains are very fragile. It can take decades to build up these industries so that you and I can have cheap consumer electronics. This is why when COVID came around, it destroyed a lot of those supply chains, and unfortunately, we're still feeling the effects of that today. This is why, in my opinion, the most impressive thing that Elon Musk has been able to do is not creating a successful commercial space program or even starting the electronic vehicle revolution. It's more about the manufacturing process that he cobbled together. When facing an extreme amount of hostility from the old guard combustion manufacturing car companies, Elon Musk was forced to vertically integrate his entire supply chain from design to manufacture to sales all by himself. This means that Tesla doesn't really depend on outside vendors nearly as much as other car manufacturers. This is very much a Henry Ford kind of moment for Elon. In a day and age where one car might be reliant on thousands of different manufacturers and vendors just to make one car, it's actually ridiculously impressive that he was able to do this. Yes, he has other character flaws, huge ones, but this was impressive. So yeah, just talking about creating an automated manufacturing plant gives me huge amounts of anxiety because of how complicated it can be. It's extremely costly. It requires a huge amount of initial capital investment and then continued investment so that the factory can continue to upgrade its machinery to accommodate future designs. The other thing is that even though these factories won't have as many laborers or people working on the line, you'll still need individuals working there, highly skilled technicians, maintenance guys, and also IT people. These are all easily going to be 6-digit salary jobs that require a lot of education and training and certification, which is very costly. I mean, you might be able to hire 3 or 4 security guards for one of these specialists. And now that we know that there are a maximum of only 12 guards on each floor, and they guard 7 rooms at 2 shifts with 49 prisoners in each room, thanks Alfred for correcting me on my shorts about that. That means there are 686 inmates for every 12 prison guards, which is insane. That's like a 57-to-1 ratio for the guards. We can also roughly estimate that this facility has 84 guards watching over 4,802 prisoners. That is a crazy amount of people being watched over by only a small handful of guards. And you know, if you took the salary you paid those guards, you could get maybe like a dozen technicians and a dozen IT guys, and they're not going to be able to maintain more than a few hundred machines. Now, most jails and prisons have a guard to inmate ratio of anywhere from 2-to-1 to 10-to-1. The fact that the Empire has a 57-to-1 ratio tells me one thing. They're all about cost-saving measures here. Now, upon first glance, Narkina 5 was very impressive. It's super clean, it's well maintained, or at least looks like it's well maintained, but if you really think about it, aside from the electrified floors, this is a relatively low-tech facility without much investment at all.
All they need to do is turn this floor on twice a day and keep their numbers rolling. Why bother listening to us?
Exactly. ANDOR understands that they don't have the manpower or really need to listen to what their conversations are. Individuals like Kino and Jembach are focused inwards now. They're just trying to survive and obey the rules because they're terrified. By the way, I really love how every time Kino becomes a little overwhelmed, he just punches Melshi like he's some kind of oversized stress relief heavy bag. Now, Andor's been in these type of situations, and he's a bit smarter than these other guys, and so he's not really thinking about his own survival as much as he's thinking about what the guards want and what the Empire wants. He realized from day one by assessing how everything worked that this was a factory much more than it was a prison. He also realized that this prison wasn't impenetrable as it appeared, and behind the gleaming white facade was just a cheaply constructed facility. And if you take a look at it, any other specialists that the prison might need could just be taken from the general populace. This medtech over here was clearly not one of the guards. And it's not like this guy has much medicine anyway, he's more of an executioner than a doctor at this point. Which brings us to the next part of this equation, and that's manpower. If these laborers were being paid to do this work, then automation might look like a much better idea. But just like how the Empire switched from manufactured clones to conscripts and volunteer troops because of costs, the Empire would also look at its massive population as a great source for free labor. Now, I did this short about the scene on Nymos a while back where the shore trooper arrested Andor. My takeaway was that this was actually a really weird scene. Shore troopers are elite soldiers within the stormtrooper ranks. To be deployed for what essentially is a peacekeeping mission, it's like having army rangers guarding Venice Beach. You just wouldn't see it happen. The police or security are usually used for these type of jobs, and their training is completely different. Or lack of treatment. But if you think about it a little more, it does actually make sense why these shore troopers are being deployed in a peacekeeping role. We know that ever since the Empire rose to power more than 15 years ago, Palpatine has essentially been building up a huge military force to pacify the entire galaxy. And although these forces look intimidating and like they're designed for war, they inevitably will have to find things to do. Keeping a massive peacetime military is not only a terrible idea, it can also drain your treasury very quickly. This is why a lot of countries with large peacetime military forces will use them on infrastructure programs to build roads, stuff like that. One of the very important jobs that the Army Corps of Engineers in my neck of the woods does is beach replenishment. Emperor Palpatine on Naimos is simply using his otherwise overly equipped military force to replenish his prison system. As we mentioned before, PORD, or the Public Order Resentencing Directive, has a huge effect on all of this.
Any criminal act, with even indirect effect on the Empire, will henceforth be branded a Class 1 offence.
All prison sentences are immediately re-evaluated.
There are really two purposes to this. One was to cast a larger net so that they can capture even more potential dissenters and enemies of the Empire. And two, it was to fill the prisons with more laborers and keep those in prison already for an even longer time. And so Emperor Palpatine has nationalized massive amounts of natural resources that he usually uses slave labor to extract materials from. Those materials are then turned into products in factories also run by slave labor. This is how he's able to afford his massive military force. And so what does Emperor Palpatine do with all the capital he does have? Well, he uses it to pay Imperials. These are people who have agreed to join his worldview, his system, and he will reward them for it. And as life outside of the Imperial bubble gets worse and even more desperate, it'll become harder for Imperials to leave behind their stable salaries and comfortable lives and join the rebellion. So there you have it, guys. That is my analysis on why slave labor is a lot cheaper than building actual automated factories for the Empire. Let me know in the comment section below what you guys think about my analysis. And as usual, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below. And as usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy.